This is your one and only FireSpark81 with your daily dose of video goodness, and today we are going to talk about build mistakes that could be causing you to struggle in Diablo 4. Let's get to it. So first off, if you are new to Diablo franchise and you are new to ARPGs in general, I highly advise just looking up a tried and tested build for whatever character you are rolling and run with that. That's going to give you a solid understanding of how builds work in the game and give you a foundation to start off of when it comes to creating your own build. There are plenty of good guides out there for whatever class you have chosen, so finding one that suits your playstyle should not be an issue. Now let's talk about custom builds. So the first mistake you may be making with your custom build is not focusing on a specific style / type of damage. Each class has a couple of different damage types that are accessible to them in their skill tree. So for example, the Necromancer has blood, bone, and darkness. The Sorcerer has ice, fire, and electricity. When you're building your first custom character, you want to just pick one of these types and focus on it. It is possible to mix and match these to some extent, but doing so relies on specific legendaries and or uniques. So because of this, it wouldn't be something that you would want to do until you hit in-game anyway. You don't need to grab every ability and every section of your skill tree that matches your chosen damage type. It's okay to double up in some sections. It's also okay to just completely ignore some sections altogether. There are totally situations where it is completely okay to ignore all of the abilities in a section and just grab the passives, giving you the points you need to eventually get to the next section where there is an ability that will help you. Likewise, it is completely okay to ignore all of the passives in one of the sections of your skill tree and pick up 2 abilities. A great example of this is a Frost Sorcerer build that I'm working on, where you pick up both Frost Nova and Ice Armor, initially ignoring all of the passives in that section. You want to make sure you stack different types of damage increases. So you have your core stat and the damage that comes from that. Then you have crit damage that stacks on top of the damage that your core stat does. Then you have the damage from, while, against, with, and to. All of those stack on top of crit and core. Then you have vulnerable, which makes the enemy weak to your damage. And then you have a percentage increase to specific damage type and specific damage as a whole. That percentage increase stacks on all of the other types. So you want to mix these as much as possible and find gear that has mixes of these if it is possible. So for example, if you find a piece of gear that has increases your damage by X percentage amount and also has increases your shadow damage by X percentage amount, and then also has increases damage to enemies that are close to you, this would be an insane piece of gear. I don't even know if that's possible to roll all of those damage increases, but I'm just using this as an example. Those are all multiplicative and they all stack on top of each other, which means you are multiplying, getting a number, then multiplying that number again, then getting a number, and then multiplying that number again, which gives you huge damage boosts. So you want to make sure you look out for things like this inside your skill tree and on your gear. And that leads me to the next thing, which is focusing on your gear. So not only do you need to make sure you get those damage increases in your skill tree, early on, you're going to be just trying to get through your skill tree to get all of your abilities. During this time and even after, it is important to also focus on the damage increases that you can get from your gear, making sure that you hunt for specific damage types that coincide with the damage types that you are using. You want to prioritize all gear that has damage increases on it. Sure, other stuff is great for survivability, but you don't need to worry about survival if everything around you is dying before it has a chance to do anything. Resistances are important, but they're not quite as important as they are until you get to World Tier 3. So if you're playing World Tier 1 or 2, sure, resistances are great, but the damage is going to help you a whole heck of a lot more. Ideally, you want every single piece of gear that you have at any given point of time while you are leveling to have some type of damage increase ability on it. Whether that just be a base damage increase, a crit damage increase, a crit strike increase, a damage from, while, against, to, etc. increase. If you do this, you will notice that the game becomes so much easier to handle because things are just dying around you so fast. You also want to make sure you're swapping out your gear for new gear about every 5 to 10 levels. This is because as your gear score increases, the numbers that gear can roll become much higher. So for example, something that is lower gear score somewhere around the 5s to 10s could roll between, let's say, 5 and 10 on a damage increase. Gear score 400, however, could roll something like between 7 and 20. And if you took my advice from my previous video where I suggest turning on the advanced tooltips, you will be able to see when these changes happen because you will be able to see what your gear could be rolling. And if you find a really good piece of gear that has really good damage on it, but it also has some useless stats on it, don't be afraid to re-roll that useless stat. Last but not least, don't be afraid to use the aspects you get from dungeons that you can just put on any piece of gear at any given point of time. These aspects can give you huge power boosts in the early game. I see so many people saying don't use aspects on your gear or craft your gear until you are in the late game or level 50, and this is just dumb advice. Crafting and putting aspects on things early game is insanely cheap. You're not gonna break the bank by throwing an aspect on 1 or 2 pieces of gear or re-rolling a couple of pieces of gear every now and then. It's insanely cheap in the early game, and it's insanely cheap in the early game for a reason, because they want you to do it. So what if 10 levels later you're gonna have a better piece of armor for that slot? It doesn't really matter because it's gonna cost you like 1 crystal and 2,000 gold, which once you get to the later game, that's just pennies. Now, I'm not saying do this for every single piece of gear you have or use every single aspect that's available to you, but slotting 1 or 2 of those on things that maybe you're not going to change out super often, like your jewelry, or maybe a good pair of pants or some boots, isn't going to leave you poor when you get to the late game. I've done this for 1.5 characters so far, and I'm setting on millions of gold, so trust me, it's not going to be a problem for you. Alright, and that is going to wrap it up for this one. If you found this video helpful or informational in any way, please consider hitting the subscribe button and notification bell so you can be notified when I upload other videos. And if you're looking for some more Diablo 4 content, you can find a link to another one of my videos on the screen right now. I want to give an absolute massive shout out and thank you to all of my channel supporters for helping to keep these videos sponsor free. You all are absolutely amazing people. If you would like to become an official channel supporter, check out the links in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought. If you're shy, you don't like to comment, just hit that thumbs up button and share your support. Until next time, thanks for watching.